call the meeting to order. If we can stand and say the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Ms. Cassotti, we have no business to speak. Okay. Reports of boards and committees.
Thank you. Yes. We met with the first gathering of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee on November 29th. The meeting took place here, at the high school, and it was from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We had 39 members. They were district and building level administrators, teachers, staff, Mrs. Goldhoff and myself, representing the Board of Education and parents, and we had multiple students from different buildings that were there. The committee's work was led by Dr. Shanahan and Mrs. Stager, and after an outline of the agenda, we started with some icebreaker activities and a very interesting exercise in the concept of identity. We moved on to an interactive review and revision of the norms that we're setting to ensure our discussions are productive and respectful. It was a very long meeting, a couple pages, sorry guys. After lunch, we individually defined the terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and marginalized groups, and then we got together and discussed those terms as well. And we finished our discussions by reading and discussing the Board of Regents DEI policy and reviewed some assigned reading from NYSED Culturally Responsive Education Framework. We will be meeting again on January 22nd, and it was a really wonderful meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any meetings or reports? All right, then we'll go right into the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. I'm pleased to welcome Mrs. Bazinski to give us a very preliminary budget report, which we call the program continuation report. But in full disclosure, this is all based on, what's the word you always use? Projections, estimates at this point, because we are still waiting for more data to come out of Albany.
Thank you. So we will be presenting almost at every meeting moving forward until we get to budget vote and adoption. This is just the first look where we take current year programming. If everything stayed exactly the same, what might that cost us next year? How will that affect our budget for the upcoming year? So we'll look at revenues and expenditures, our overall budget forecast, and take a little peek at 3-year view, and then summary and any questions that you might have. So on the revenues, one of our big revenues is our property tax levy. So we estimated this based on a tax cap calculation of 2.26%, which is an increase of about $192,000. Our tax base growth factor, which measures the amount of growth in the town, did decrease from 0.0014 to 0.007, so not a significant change, but unfortunately not an increase. And then we estimated CPI at 2%. So that one number is what people often refer to as the 2% tax cap. It's just one of many calculations that go into that. Along with that is our capital exclusion. So our capital exclusion are costs that our voters authorize through separate resolutions, mostly through capital votes. So it's the difference between the debt that we have to pay and the revenue that we're going to get through state aid. So because the voters authorized us to spend that money, we have the ability to add that into our tax cap. So this year that is about $924,000. That will be updated when we get final state aid numbers, as well as some BOCES information on their capital expenses. And then one of the calculations of the exclusion is ERS. If the ERS rate increases more than 2%, any increase above 2% can be included as an exclusion. This year, the ERS rate is projecting to increase 2.1%. So I didn't include that 0.1% yet, but we'll keep an eye on it and then have some final answers for that before the tax cap calculation is due in the end of February. For our purposes tonight, we did not include any state aid increases. We wanted to focus on the revenues, that are outside of that, as well as all of our expenditures. And this allows us to see the reliance that our budget has on those state aid increases, whether it's foundation aid increases or our expense-driven aids. We'll update the state aid when we get the more accurate runs from the governor's or the executive proposal in January. So our February budget presentation will include that information. In miscellaneous revenues, we saw an increase of about 9%, or projecting an increase, about $650,000. We increased our sales tax revenue to be a little closer to what we brought in the last 2 years. So while we thought we would see some significant decreases in Erie County sales tax revenue, the opposite happened, and that has grown over the last couple of years. Our Medicaid reimbursements have increased, so we upped the revenue there. That makes sense. If you think about the last couple of years, we've increased our expenditures for our special education students and our high needs students dramatically. So now it would make sense that our Medicaid reimbursements would increase as well, because oftentimes those services are Medicaid eligible. Tuition and health services increased $135,000, and then we had a decrease in our pilot payments. Pilots are properties in the town that are taken off the rolls with an agreement with the IDA, and we use those as a separate revenue because we invoice them directly at a reduced rate. So when the pilots come off the books or get completed, we have to reduce that revenue, but then in turn it affects our tax calculation. So it goes in both sides. Our transfers, we stayed consistent. We left $80,000 in transfers from our revenues for unemployment and tax tertiary, and then $1 million appropriated in fund balance to support the budget, which we've used every year. And then this year we used the balance of our debt service fund, which is about $127,000. That comes in as a revenue and also reduces our tax calculation. So those are funds that we received through bond borrowing. They were premiums. So because they were a direct revenue from one of our capital expenses, it is included in the capital exclusion as a revenue there as well. So all of that rolled together gives us a total revenue budget of just over $77 million, or just over 2%. Now again, that does not include any state aid increases. There's a slight change between state aid and building aid. That's because we know our building aid is going to decrease, but the bottom line, we kept the same at $27.4 million this year. We'll update that when the state aid revenues come out. And then we also kept state aid flat for the next years. The only number I included was another decrease in building aid next year. Again, those are scheduled building aid decreases. We expect them to happen, and you will see a corresponding decrease in debt payments each of those years as well. So they go hand in hand. For the next 2 years on our miscellaneous revenues, we use modest increases for 3%, 1%, sometimes we keep it flat. Those are just estimates at this point. And the pilots are projections based on current agreements in place. So if an agreement came off the books early for some reason, or if a new agreement came on the books, those numbers would change as well. On the expenditure side, again, all estimates. We have a 4.5% increase in personnel, about $1.5 million. So these are all of our contractual costs, but it does not include any retirements yet. It doesn't include any changes. So if every staff member in place today is going to stay for next year, those would be our costs. And it also includes all of the stimulus positions that we previously funded with our federal dollars, that this is the final year of rolling them into general fund. So we were very fortunate during these years that we've had this stimulus money that our foundation aid was increasing proportionately. Every year we had a very specific plan of how we were going to pull those positions into general fund so that it didn't have a major impact on the budget, and we didn't find ourselves needing to cut a significant number of positions to make the budget balance. So that worked, along with those increases in foundation aid. On the benefit side, we talked about the ERS rate is looking like it's going to land at about 15.2%, which is an increase. It's currently 13.1. TRS, I used a projected rate of 10%. This year it's 9.76, which is $63,000 increase. But the range is what's been reported so far, 9.75 to 10.25. So I landed right in the middle. So when we have that final number, we'll be able to adjust that accordingly. FICA-Med, the rate's staying the same, but it's about a $45,000 increase just due to salary increases. If the salaries don't increase that much, that won't increase that much either. Health insurance, we don't have our final projections yet. We increased the budget about $250,000. Our health insurance budget was a little bit underfunded this past year, so we want to increase it to try and get caught up to where we are this year. And then workers' compensation, we're not expecting to see an increase in that premium. We have a couple good years under our belt, so our premium rates are staying the same. General support has a small increase of 2.3%. We increased $70,000 only for liability insurance and utilities. And then the budget maintains the current capital outlay project line of $100,000, as well as the $2 million contingency line that we implemented in this current budget. On the instruction side, we have an increase of 8.7%, or just over $500,000. Tuition, charter tuition is increasing. Our per student tuition increases, and we have a handful more students enrolled this year than we did last year. Health services is increasing about $320,000. Those are payments that we make to other districts for health services that they're providing to Amherst students. And just like us, every district in our area has been providing more and more of those health and mental health services. So those per pupil allocations are increasing, just like ours are increasing. Athletics had a $10,000 increase, and then we increased our SRO and building security services line to accommodate the services that are in place for this year. And then there's a shift from our special ed private tuition funds into our BOCES line. So last year we added cushion or extra slots in both private tuition and BOCES tuition. What we found this year is that we needed more of that money in the BOCES placements than we did the private placements. So we've already shifted some of that money down this year. So this continues that trend of needing a little bit less on the private tuition side, not because the students maybe don't need those private tuition lines, or placements, but we haven't always been able to find availability in the private placements. So fortunately, we've had a lot of programming with our BOCES placements. So then in BOCES, we have just under a 7% increase. You can see almost $500,000 of that is for our special ed tuition line. So it's really about $300,000 if you take into account the $200,000 that we transferred from the private lines. There was another increase to athletics. Our membership dues are increasing because they're changing the structure of their programming. So our portion of that is just under $7,500. And then we had 3% increase on our various lines. We will have a participation meeting with BOCES the end of January, early February, and that's the meeting where we go through line by line all of the services that we have, talk about what we need to keep, if there's any that we can drop, if we need to add any, and what their projected costs are going to be for next year. Our technology replacement schedule is still in place, but we increased several years in a row in the past, so now that's in a good spot where we can just maintain the level of funding that's there now. So we don't need to keep increasing, but we're able to still purchase what's needed for our students. And then the BOCES project, they have capital projects. So we had 3 years of a project payment that we were able to fund through budget and not have to borrow or bond for. So we've made that final payment, so there's a decrease there of just over $230,000. Transportation. We are in our second year of a 2-year extension on our transportation contract. So we have reached out to First Student to get their feedback on if they are planning to offer another extension or if we're going to go out to bid. So currently we increased the budget about $300,000, $327,000, which was about 8%. It's a 5% increase in general expenditures, but we also needed to add a run this year. So we had an extra run in our budget using stimulus dollars in the past. And we did that to reduce density on the buses. There are a couple of our buses that had like 60 kids on them, and with physical distancing and trying to keep kids spaced out a little bit, we added an extra run. We were planning to end that this year, but First Student found that it was needed based on some of the specialized runs that we had with midday pickups and some out-of-town pickups. And then we also needed to increase our gasoline budget. So part of our contract with First Student is to provide, I want to say it's like 60,000 gallons, a certain number of gallons of fuel based on the miles that they drive for us, and the cost of gas increasing with diesel and gasoline. That budget was a little light this year, so we have a $20,000 increase for next year. And then debt service, we have a decrease of just over $300,000, and that's planned based on our amortization schedule for all of our debt. So overall, we have a expenditure budget of $78.6 million, very conservative. We didn't include a lot of, or some of the areas that may be able to be reduced, such as retirements and benefits. So as we go through the next couple months and meet with our vendors and our contractors, all of these numbers will be updated and become more accurate as we go through the budget development season. But this is a $3 million increase in spending, or about 4.12%. Into future years, again, we're just using percentage estimates, 4% for personnel, 3% the following year, 2%, 3%. I did update debt service because we know what that's going to be based on our amortization schedule, so I did include that. And then I maintained the $2 million contingency line in each of the years. So with all of that, not including any state aid, we show a $1.5 million gap this year. As you would expect, the gap grows into year 2 and 3, but again, there's no state aid in there at all. So if we don't have any state aid this year, there's 2 years worth of state aid not included in year 2. So once we plug in our state aid for this year and put in some projections for future years, you'll see those numbers become much more manageable and reasonable regarding where we really think our budget will land. So $1.5 million increase in revenues with no increase to state aid. Expenditures are about $3 million, or 4.1%. We talked about the different areas. We'll update our state aid projections when the government or executives are released at the end of January, and then we'll look at it again for final runs in April. Next steps, we will monitor state aid. We'll revise our tax cap as those figures become finalized. We've already started setting up meetings with the administrative team to talk about the needs for their specific buildings and departments. We'll look at areas of the budget that we have flexibility to either increase or decrease based on upcoming and changing student needs. We will work with our vendors to get updated estimates on some of their services. And then another area we can look at is an allocation of reserves if we decide that that's needed, especially with ERS and TRS rates increasing. Those reserves are there exactly for that purpose. In years where we have large increases, we can allocate some of those reserves to help lessen the impact on our budget. February 6th, be the next one that will have an update and hopefully some state aid information. Any questions? It's a lot.
How long does our transportation contract go for?
It was a 5-year. We extended for 1, and now we've extended for 2. So this is we're in year 2 of the 2-year extension.
So that means next year we have to renew, or?
We either have to go out to bid again this year, or if our student offers an extension, we can consider that. So the current terms of our contract are CPI increases. So then everything else stays the same. That's what we've done for the last 3 years.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all we have in the superintendent's report tonight.
All right, we need a motion for new business then.
I'll make a motion for new business E1A through P, 2B, C, D, E, and 3, C, D, G, H.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of approving new business items E1, A through P, 2, B through E, 3, C, D, G, and H, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-0. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome 2 new team members, both Jessicas. If you could...
Seems to be a popular name.
If you wouldn't mind just standing and telling us who you are, where you're going to be, and stuff, we would appreciate it.
I can go first.
Sure, that'd be great.
Are we being recorded?
We are. Yes.
Jessica Marone, so I'm coming to the district with background in special education. I'm certified, my professional certification is special ed 1 through 6 as well as childhood 1 through 6, and I will be teaching ELA 6th grade here at the middle school, so I'm very excited about that.
Fantastic. Welcome to our team. We look forward to working with you.
My name is Jessica as well, Jessica Federation. I will be at Windermere Elementary teaching, I believe, kindergarten through 2nd grade ENL. I am an alumni of Windermere myself, so I'm very, very excited that everything has kind of come full circle. And I love this district. I've been here myself. I've taught here as a TA as well. So I love that I'm getting to come back here.
Great. Welcome to our team.
Thank you.
It's always nice to see people come back that went to school here. Mrs. Custodi, do we have any follow-up action items?
No.
All right, then we need a motion to convene to executive session.
I'll make a motion to convene to executive session to discuss matters regarding employment of a particular person.
Do you have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of convening to executive session, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, everybody, for coming.